right. First off.
Yes.
Before we talk about how it went today, it's December, and you have your guided reading groups up and rolling, and your reading workshop.
They were doing something stuff.
They were. Now
it was interesting today because I felt like there was like a buzz behind us, and it was hard to tell, good buzz or distracted, not on task buzz.
Right.
That was hard to.
That's, I mean, we want them to be productive
Doing
while
something.
you're,
so
that you can do your group.
Entertained.
So every once in a while you might want to do a little, like, check-in to see what they're doing, but, I mean, from what I could hear and see, we were staying on task, staying at our stations, you know.
Yeah, I'd love to starting early so I can have a little gap in between to check in and then go to my next group. But I gave so much time to that first group. I realized I was like, oh.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
But I have to remember it was 1 or 2 or 3 that were a little off task. Just kind of, and Mrs. Beagle had to redirect them. And there was one moment I was like, that group right there.
Well,
like,
and that
help
might
us.
be part of it is that Mrs. Beagle might just need to have like a little tighter
or
on
I
the
want to
volume.
give her a list of things I would like redirections for, because there are sometimes they just don't know what to redirect, because there is a lot of choice in that time, like, and I've heard them say sometimes, oh, you're not supposed to be doing that, but that is a choice they can be doing, making a book or playing with Play-Doh, making letters out of Play-Doh. But a list of like, these are things, if you see
this, then redirect a little if-then for her. Yeah, that would be great. But really, I mean, for kindergarten in December.
In a small room where it's loud and...
They're just, it was a buzz, but it was it felt like a really productive buzz.
Okay, good.
To me, I don't know if it was distracting.
It was, there were moments we couldn't hear, but it was funny when Mary observed last Wednesday, they were so quiet. It was just like, it was so just fun to be able to just relish in the book club, kind of. But today we were like, oh, like I felt like, and Sally talked a lot too, and that was hard for me. I'd love to talk about that. Yes. Because that was her first time in that group, and I think she was feeling confident and good about, she knew what this book might be about, and had a lot to say, but I felt a little too much, but when, so the student-directed piece, but now we got to get back to the teacher-directed, because people were kind of, oh, we're done. Right. You know, and Ava was just kind of going off then at that point. Right. That was tricky to balance.
So it is that balance. So our question was, if we find the right text, are we able to increase student ownership and independence with reading strategies, such as the get your mouth ready, use your pictures, all stretch out your word, all of those strategies. And then kind of looking at what scaffolds we can put into place to increase that independence. And not make them so dependent on you. So with that in mind, kind of think through today's lesson. What things do you feel like went really well? What were you feeling good about?
That's what I'm wondering what well is, because I thought right away, oh, this book is hard. Like, this book is maybe too hard. And Zelly on that first page was like, oh. But then I gave her a little something. And then she was able to use some strategies where she said, oh, now I'm rereading, and this is the word over, and I'm rereading it with the word, I know it now. And she had a little bit of a productive struggle, did okay throughout it. And then Henry, I was wondering about him. He has, and I think he did well. He still was second-guessing some of the things he would read and, like, look up. Looking for affirmation from me. Jack, that was tricky for him, and that was his first day with a trickier text and in that group.
Jack was the one you moved up, and Zelly was the one you moved down. Okay.
Which I was interesting to see that look so tricky for Zelly initially, because I had her in a group where we were reading very pattern C texts, so that was interesting. And Jack, you could still, like, I let him have a productive, because it's more like reading the Jan Richardson. It's not about a perfect read the first time through. It's about just kind of solving and thinking. And do you remember the one point he said, jig puzzle, jig puzzle, it's a jig puzzle. Like, he knew that
he knew it wasn't quite right, but he knew it was close. Yeah.
Jig puzzle. And I didn't correct him, but looking back, But then when do you kind of, like, is he going home and will they? So I'm like, oh, because that's solving and he's thinking.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So
there's a lot of moments to support them. So I wouldn't say there was a ton of independence. But then is there a point, if I give them a book, they have a lot of independence, it's too easy. Like my F group, was that a productive book to have for a whole week now at home? I don't know.
Okay.
So what's well, I'm not sure.
So let's tease out, because this is a really hard thing with guided reading. Guided reading is, I'm going to support you, but I'm going to support you, but if we look at our, do I have it in here right now? I don't think I do, but if we look at our strategic balance literacy, guided reading is one of our lower levels of support, which is actually kind of surprising to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we build that strategic, the continuum, people are like, well, guided reading is like your highest level. You're in a small group. But really a shared reading or an interactive reading is more high support.
Interesting.
And right before we get to independent reading is our guided reading.
Okay.
Because what we're doing is we're giving them just enough support on that cusp of where they are, so that when we do walk away and say, okay, now go do it at independent reading, they got it.
Where they probably cannot read that book now independently.
Right. So let's think about how could we, but do you think, because I think you picked that book for the right reason.
I knew it would be tricky, but
you knew it would be tricky.
I was a little.
But you also knew, because you told me yesterday, you also knew that the pattern was going to help them. So it was going to the pattern was going to scaffold them to a point, and then they were going to have things like book cart, jigsaw, that they needed to figure out either with picture clues or with some word solving, or some of it might be a give. So that's kind of the question that we're always wondering is, what's a give? What do I just give them?
Like over.
Yeah.
Because how much time they spend on that, they're not going to get it.
It's a tricky word for them at their.
Yeah.
Is it like just a sight word?
And that even language structure. Let's go over to the book cart.
Instead of let's go to the book cart.
Saying that.
Right. Right. So what we want to look at with A, B, kind of into C, but mostly A, B is how can we just give them, and then it's kind of like let's reverse it. One of the things, and I want to make this really make sure that we tease this out, because one of the strengths that I really saw in your teaching was, in order to get them ownership, every time they got to the point of frustration or being confused, just the point of difficulty, never, I could not find a spot where you jumped in and gave it to them.
Okay.
You were using questions like, why did you go back and reread that? You were having them really reflect on what they could do. What could you try? What could you try next? Well, if you know that, then what could you?
Even with like the pictures and the paintings, I really wanted to give
wanted them
that,
to give it
but
to.
I was like, oh, somebody's gonna get it, and just that they were noticing that has an A in it, and and then Zelly said paintings. Those are and that was hard to see in that picture too. There was no paintbrush there to see it was
there weren't
a painting.
enough clues. So what we have to kind of look through the lens of is, if I want to get them really in an A, B, I want to get them. I want to get them reading. I want to get them more confident.
True. Okay.
So one of the things that we can look at is sort of looking at more of an I read, we read, then you go off and read.
Yes.
We take away that kind of question mark for them.
Yes.
They're still going to have to do some word solving, because they're not going to hold the whole text in their memory.
See, that's what I worry, but knowing they're probably not going to hold it.
Yes.
So okay, because I think, oh no, I want them to word solve. This might be too easy.
Right.
But it's still, they want to be reading confidently.
Right. And we saw that a little bit. Henry, he was getting it, but he wasn't very confident.
But he wasn't,
Zelly was, like you said, right when she got it and stuff. So with this structure, and the thing about this structure is that you're only going to use it, it's a temporary scaffold.
Okay.
So we're not going to live here. So you do your regular warm-up like you had them do with their silent reading, you do your book introduction. Then you model read it to them. Practicing all of those things really explicitly, one-to-one, which they have, but using the picture for meaning, continuing to support all of those.
So I'm reading the book.
You read it to them.
Okay.
Yep. So you might not even give it to them yet.
Yes, I know that.
Because that's a whole like motor thing,
and
but you might be
Sarah
holding.
Today, and she said have them lean in, so they're not like all back here. They're with the book still.
We could be reading this to them, and then when we get done, we could discuss the meaning of it, and then we could do a shared reading. So high level of support. Shared reading, and now they can have their book, or you can do one together, whichever you think with that group will work better. And we're going to shared read it and really support their shared reading, practicing with their pointing, but also maybe practicing some of those trickier words like jigsaw.
Yeah. Yes.
So that when they get to that point of difficulty, they're like, I got this. Then you're going to let them go, and you're going to let them read it on their own. And that's where you're going to just listen in, kind of like you were today, and letting them read it and noting how they're doing.
So this is kind of like choral reading? Okay.
Yep, so this is everybody, we're going to read it together with the shirt. You're holding it, or you could have them have them. And I can show you this tomorrow.
Turn it the same.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we all read together.
Of that. I'm trying to visualize. Okay.
And then after that, then just let them read it. And this is where you're going to...
So they leave the table?
No, stay right there.
Okay.
But this is where, because let's see, your lesson
I like
started
this format because I even felt like I did not get through everything. It just felt too much of the wrong stuff. Like just this, I like that this is a lot in the book.
This is very in the book. Now, you can still do a quick, like, in your warm-up, you could still do your word work. I think, is that what you're talking about? That was too long.
Much time on
you
that.
Spent, word work, you started at 10:38. And then you spent about 8 minutes in word work.
Oh, okay.
And then on the new book at the library, you spent with this group, you spent that was about 14 minutes, 14 or 15 minutes. So when we look at that, you know, it's just something to be aware of, you know.
Yes.
Do A and B need a lot of word work? Sure.
Yeah.
You know. And what this does is this has it come here. It does not mean it has to be here. What you were doing is putting word work first. And why might that benefit them?
To support them when they read.
Yeah, and to really warm up that. Yeah. So you can do that during that warm up here. You could do a quick little warm up of some review, and then you might add a new word here that they came across. But you fed that today at the beginning, which was fine because then they were able to practice using it.
Yeah.
So with this, we're just really, when you did today, about out of the 15 minutes that you're on your new book, you guys were talking. Let's see, where you. So you when you did like your book walk through it, they had about 11 minutes with you and about 4 minutes practicing on their own.
Okay.
So with this, we're gonna just kind of get right to it.
Yes.
Kind of give.
Yes.
Give it to them.
Okay.
Just give it to them. Practice it with them, and then have them try it.
Okay.
So sometimes, and the reason behind that is we don't want to quiz them on like, can you guys figure this out? If it's something we've never taught, like painting, we've never taught the AI in painting. The picture didn't really support it enough, so that might just be a give.
Okay.
Jigsaw.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah, so you can kind of take away, and it's something that like when I was going through my guided reading training, I was like, I like would watch myself on video. I would sit there and I would ask, okay, can you guys figure this out? Can you figure this? Because I wanted them to be doing the work. It's with the right intention.
Yes.
But in order to get to the right work, so like you just said, I felt like I wasn't doing the right work.
Yes, it just,
So this can give them, just give it to them and then let them practice.
Okay.
And because you're in the back of your mind, you're thinking, after they leave this table, they should be able to go read this independently.
And be excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
Not like, oh gosh. You know, like I felt like they left the table like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I don't like this book.
Yeah, we want them to leave feeling like,
I
read this book.
All of their hair was just like, ooh, because they were all a little too much. Like, I was like, that was too much.
So let's see if doing this gives us that feeling of just kind of getting to the right work, and also gets them, by the time that they leave, one of our goals is to really have them see that independence during the read, but have them also feel really good. Like ownership of like, I'm a reader, I just read this book by the end of it. So with that in mind, I pulled just 4 books. And I was thinking we could kind of look through and just kind of, we talked about that text selection. We could pick what book we feel like is the best fit for them right now. What I heard you, and I even heard Zellie talk a little bit about today, is they're memorizing their books a little bit, and they're not reading the author's words exactly. They're just making it. Would you say that you worry about that a little bit?
Well, that's why I think I don't give, because I think, oh, and then they go and read it. They've memorized. Like, I'm just like afraid they won't word solve. They won't get to something tricky, so they have nothing to really, their brain doesn't work, or doesn't stretch, maybe, I'll say. Doesn't stretch. That's my fear, and then nobody makes progress. I don't know. That's just my fear. So I think that's why I didn't give, because I was, you need to do the work.
Right. So we want them, I know.
That balance of you're independent, but you're also, that's hard.
So like a word that we might want them to solve might be, I'm trying to think of today, cart.
Yes.
You had Jack, and he was like, Zellie said it holds books, and he went, art, and you're like, Jack, you stretched that out.
Yeah, but then later he went back and went, art. Carrot. And that, I don't know. So that was tricky.
So this would be a word that, do we think he should be able to solve that using his strategies? Yeah. And then once he gets it, yes, you're right, that's cart. Do you see a word in that? Whatever he's using, he's stretching that out. But painting might be a give because they just don't have, other than
I anticipated they would say pictures, but they're not at the point yet to see pick in pictures, and then try something else, because it doesn't fit anything patent.
So if we look at we looked at this book and we see that it's that pattern, which all A, B, C's are that repetitive. The shells are for my sandcastle. The shells go here. The sticks are for my sandcastle. The sticks go here. The seaweed is for my sandcastle. The seaweed goes here. So, what do you think about a text like this?
I like that. These are the ones I would like. It's almost like an A-B, that pattern. Like you see a pattern on the A pattern on one, and then the B pattern, and then the A pattern, and then the B. But it's not. The seaweed goes here. The shells go here. Yes, I like
So this
that.
would stretch them a little bit, and then it goes back and forth. And
then
the
back and forth. That makes sense.
Let me see. There was one. Okay, this one.
I've seen this one.
Have you seen?
Yeah.
Okay.
I read this with a group a while ago.
But this group or a different group?
No,
okay. Lily's at the farm. Where are the ducks? Said Lily. So we could talk a little bit right here about her talking and our quotations, just a little extra. The horses are here. And this seems, what do you think about this page? What might they struggle with?
This, where and said, even Lily, but we would start, I'd kind of give that her name, like I gave in the F group sign in, because I thought, I'm not going to make them. Right.
So, thinking through the lens of if we read this to them first, we're going to give them, and even in the book introduction, we could say, this is Lily.
And more excitement for the book, too. So when they do get to a struggling, or a point where they're struggling, they're kind of using the sense for the story. She's at the farm.
Yep.
She's talking to her dad.
Yeah, because in here we're going to discuss meaning before they go read it on their own.
Yes.
So they're going to have the structure of the story. They're going to have the whole meaning of the story before they try it on their own. Then it goes to that really... The horses are here, the cows are here, the sheep are here.
Oh, I like this.
Aha! Okay, now why do you think this might be a little bit of a curveball for them? But would this be a good curveball? We read a book kind
of like this 2 weeks ago with the original group, and we read it and they went and they kind of paused.
So is that what we want them doing?
Yeah, to kind of go... And I could imagine if I sent them off, they would go do the same, and then think.
But they're correcting using.
Yes.
We want them like if they're gonna
there
break
are a few
from
tricky moments, not a ton of tricky moments.
Yeah. Here are the cats. Here are the chickens. So it switches patterns. Here are the ducks. Here is a little duck for Lily. So we kind of have a little bit of a story, too, because she's discovering all these things, and then by the end she kind of gets her little duck, which we've already read this part together. We'll have read that. So do you think that has enough challenge in it?
Yes.
Do you think it's
change.
too challenging?
I don't know. I like that the pattern, there was a pattern originally, and it switched, but it still kept a pattern. Here is, and then getting to see here.
Do you feel like we could give it a try with this structure?
Oh, yeah, I think, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to give this a try tomorrow with this structure, and we'll just see whether we think this group...
Tomorrow or Friday?
I'm sorry, Friday.
Okay.
We'll see whether we think this group, this works for this group. And you can see down here it says, work through multiple texts, gradually increasing to level C using this method. So using this for a couple of weeks. Then go back to level A and teach the typical guided reading lessons using different books with a book introduction and guided reading plan sheet. If the students are semi-secure at C and close to moving to D, use the guided reading lesson plan sheet and do a typical lesson. So we want to really like, okay, I do, we do, you do. Or I do, I read, we read, you read. And just to get them going, get them in that flow and that confidence. And then we're going to go all the way back to A. And we're going to give them some books that were like, oh my gosh, remember how you were reading at the table with me with a little bit of help? Now I'm just going to have you read these books. Oh, you just read that book? Okay, now let's try this one.
See, that's really
and you're just
what
kinda
I want. Okay.
Get them going. Okay? Does that work for this crew? Okay.
Yes,
so
I'm excited for
a little duck for Lily. And this plan. Okay, do you want to switch gears and look at, I know we're going to look at F with Sarah, but let's look a little bit at what happened today with F. Okay, so you were with F for about 18 minutes.
And we had one newbie in there. Sarah was our newbie in that group.
Okay, and then tell me of the twins. Who was in
Robert
the middle?
Sat over here. John was right in front of you.
Okay. John, you were working with John a lot, and I kept writing
They too are receiving, John's receiving speech services. I wonder if you could tell that.
It was hard to hear him too.
Yeah, and they're reading. But he's still reading so high, but it's still the pronunciations are not. But he's still saying that word.
Yeah, and that's okay. We don't want to hold
understanding of that word.
Yeah, and since he's working on speech, we'll just keep as long as you can. As long as you know that he's got the right words. So let's look in the continuum at F, because we're really you did a little bit of the word work and really pulled some higher said and took, and they did a pretty good.
And then Away was the one that stumped all of them. But they could read it in the book.
So what does that tell us?
This decoding versus remembering from memory, being able to spell the word versus being able to read the word.
So we might want to just keep that in mind as we're looking at word work. how much of their word work should be reading words and how much of it should be writing the words.
Yeah.
And you did have them write a good amount.
I'd love for them to work on blends, though. That would be interesting. But I don't know. Are they kind of past that, though? What would be the next? The vowel teams? I don't know.
Yeah, and when we're looking at this, I don't know if we need to move on to, like, the vowel teams and stuff until they can show control over some of these things in writing.
Yeah, because they weren't able to draw out any words that ended with ED, and I don't know if that was just not being able to hear it, but from memory they couldn't visualize words that would be with an ED.
Right. So we might want to, the next time on Friday, we might want to look at taking exactly what they identified. Oh, all those EDs have a T sound.
Yeah.
So maybe the word work to start is to have them either give them a whole bunch of words and have them add ED to it, or give them a few words and have them think of a few words that you add ED to, and have them really write it.
It will be tricky meeting with them again, because then that will push one of my groups out.
And we could
4,
wait
5,
till
and
next.
6. That would be nice, because I do need to meet with 4 and 5.
Yeah, that's okay, and we can just kind of talk about what we would do with them. We don't necessarily have to.
And Sarah would like to be.
Yeah, and so that's okay if we just meet with the group 2. So yeah, looking in here, just kind of think about how they're doing a good job with reading the words, but if we have them take apart the words and we have them look at base words and we have them look at endings and we have them do it in writing, I think they might have a lot of work to do here, even though it's in these higher levels where sometimes they can come across really good, but when we dig deeper, it's not as sound as we thought it was. Okay, then do you feel like this within the text is pretty good at, and that's where you're feeling like the text is too easy for them?
Yes. But then speaking about independence, then they could go read that book on their own, but I don't think no one at that table felt there was no teaching. I kind of felt like I had to pull my teaching point out of nowhere.
So we want to go in with that teaching point that we're looking for the group.
That's what okay.
And there's a structure I'll look at with Sarah.
Versus waiting to see what should be the just go in knowing what I'm
giving your book introduction, and then telling them it's okay. You don't have to do like a ton of walk through the book with this group, but give them today while you're reading.
Okay.
And give them like a task to do. I want you to think about the characters today while you're reading. Do they change at all? I want you to think about the setting today. Was it important to the story? So give them that think about thing, and then I can even give you the sheet where it's just kind of like what do you want them to do while they're reading, and then what you want them to do when they're finished, since they kind of finish at different points. And it might be that you want them to do some type of written response.
They really do need a different structure, and I learned that the first day we met. Don't walk through the book with them, because they were just like, we want to read it.
Yeah.
I don't want to look at the pictures.
And with this, since they're doing so well, you might have a give of a name. You might have a give of some background knowledge that you think a few kiddos in that group don't know, like.
Because I wonder about the dog, like having background knowledge on the dog, but they did okay. But I could have, like, what do you know about dogs?
And you can even just feed it.
Yeah.
If it's something that's gonna that's gonna trick them up in the book, and it's based on background knowledge, you can just say,
"This is what dogs."
You probably all have dogs, and if you didn't know this, but dogs need 3 walks a day.
Okay.
I don't know, whatever it is that's important to understanding the story. Just give it and then let them go, and then you can really spend your time with this group in here.
Okay.
And this is where you're like, okay, what's my teaching point that I really want to be focused on with them? I want them to not only express an opinion, but I want them to actually get information from the text. So when they say, I didn't like the part when this happened, tell me what happened
Yeah,
that you didn't like about it.
Yes.
So that you're pushing them back into that text evidence.
Because that was interesting, because Juliana had strong retell, like almost every single page. And then this happened, and then they did that, and then that, and then that, but didn't express I didn't pull an opinion from her.
There you go. So we could pull the opinion out from her. We could also get her to kind of make a few judgments about how people in the book. Would you have done the same thing, Juliana? Or would you have done it a little differently? So getting them to start thinking a little higher level about the text. So these are just all different things that we can, a couple of them I did write down, made connections to the text. I have a dog too, or there were a couple different ones that just kind of, oh, that was sad. I know. And then just kind of having them notice new information that they're learning. Maybe it is something that they've never really learned about, especially if it's a new thing that's never happened to them in a fiction book or an informational book. And you did talk to them a little bit about inferring.
Yeah, that was interesting because I hadn't picked that up when I read the book the few times that I did, that they were like, oh, the gate. He was closing, but then the dog kept escaping. So there was kind of a little, he needed to close it carefully, but then the dog still got out. Oh, he might be jumping. Dogs run and jump.
Right. Oh, the gate might be broken.
Yeah.
Oh, you know. So you might actually, that might be a today while you're reading. I want you to think of, is there anything that you're wondering about that the author doesn't tell us that you really would have liked him to tell us this? And then you could talk to him about, that's inferring. Authors don't always tell us everything. So those can be kind of fun things. And if there's some word-solving things, you can just tell them, I want you to, you could even give them a Post-it note. I want you to be on the lookout on page 9. And when you find a word that is tricky to you, write it on this Post-it note.
I like that idea.
And then they might, we're at least getting them to pay attention when they don't understand a word. And then you guys can come back together and talk about it. And you can talk about different strategies for how you got past that, you know, even if you didn't know what it was. So
yes.
Okay, so that's kind of some ideas for F. Having them when they're finished, and I'll give you this sheet, but a little thing that says, today while reading, do this. After you're done reading, do this. And then having them thinking, you could even use the Calkins paper, but having them respond in some way to the reading, whether it's through a picture, whether it's through giving them a sentence starter, and then they finish the sentence, just some way of responding to that reading tied directly to what your teaching point is for that day.
Okay.
So if you really picked that inferring piece that you kind of pulled out today, then, you know, if you're responding to reading might have been...
Because I feel like, well, when Mary observed, like, I thought I did really well with that with the whole group read aloud. Like, when we read, this is what I want you to think about. What Sherry tells us about families. After we read, I'm going to ask you, what did she tell you about families? But then I haven't been doing that.
So you can pull it over to the guided reading table, and this group's definitely ready for that.
It makes so much sense.
Yeah. And if you have it in writing, since we know they're readers, if you have it in writing, when they forget, you can just point them right back to it. And that's that ownership thing, like, oh, I told you this is your job. And then after they're done reading, then they just are like, oh, I finished the book, now I'm gonna, and really pushing them to, like, find it. Find where you had that, and they can use their books, or pushing them right back into it to get that evidence.
Okay.
Does that feel good?
That is exciting.
So since we're not going to do F on Friday, what if we